Coach Brian here with Northwest Elite Spirit, and this is my review of Becoming Accessible to Power from Journey to Ixtlan by Carlos Castaneda, The Power of Visualization. Now, from the beginning, Don Juan is demonstrating more practical advice. People might think he's being weird or pushy or bossy, but it's just practical advice. So he's asking Carlos if he usually carries around his briefcase when he walks, and Carlos says that he does. Don Juan says, "That's madness. I've told you never to carry anything in your hands when you walk. Get a knapsack." And Carlos laughs at him and says that the idea of wearing a knapsack over a three-piece suit is ludicrous. And Don Juan tells him, "Put your coat on over your knapsack. It's better that people think you're a hunchback than to ruin your body carrying all of this around." And through this series so far, it seems that there's a theme where Don Juan is trying to get Carlos to get over his embarrassment of what other people may think. He tells him to talk to plants loudly, out loud, even when there's people around. Later on in this one, he's telling him to be loud so he can make himself accessible to power. Here he's telling him to put your coat on over the knapsack because it's better that people think you're a hunchback than to ruin your body by carrying all this around. And it's true. And how many of us do these things where we ruin our mental and physical state rather than have people think something of us, rather than be embarrassed about what other people might think. And it just makes me think about how most of us go along with how the world expects us to go about, even when it ruins us. Carlos has began to have like vivid dreams and nightmares, and Don Juan laughs and says, "You're beginning to learn." Now that I've heard that when we become enlightened or have any sort of spiritual breakthrough, we go through things like this. And I can't say that I'm enlightened, yet I can say that when I've had shifts in perspective, it's made me uneasy, and my dreams have changed. And it's almost like new levels bring new devils. So when you get stronger as a person, or you get stronger at visualization or dreaming, your dreams get stronger. So Carlos is going on to say, like, this time my dreams are truly weird. They bother me, and isn't there something I can do to stop them? And Don Juan says, "Nothing. Let them pass." And I've been a lucid dreamer for a long time. My earliest memory is a lucid dream, and letting them pass is really the only way. And once you learn how to dream, nightmares can go away, and vivid and strange dreams will no longer bother you. And how I came to this realization was I was having something you could call a nightmare. I was being chased by all of these men in military uniforms, and they were in tanks and snowmobiles, and they had guns, and they were after me. And I was fighting off them all, except one, and he seemed to be invincible. Like no matter what I did, he would not go down. And I realized I was in a dream, and I stop. At this point, I'm being chased through a building, and I stop, and I turn to him and I say, "You can't play anymore. Sit down." And he sits down, and I continue the dream. And that was the dream where I realized that I had way more control of my dreams than I ever imagined. And that's the dream. After that, I had no more nightmares. And so Don Juan says to him, "Now it's time for you to become accessible to power, and you are going to begin by tackling dreaming." And Don Juan goes on to explain to Carlos that in dreams, somebody with power, a warrior, can manipulate his dreams. He can choose to take the actions that he wants and to use the tools that he wants, and he can seek information within that dream And Carlos is saying that normally he takes Don Juan as being one of the most, if not the most, level-headed man he'd ever met, but he can't imagine that a man can do what he wants in his dreams. And I'm thinking that Carlos is up to his old tricks again here, simply again arguing just to argue, and to seem smarter than Don Juan, and to hold on to his old practices. I'm pretty sure every single one of us has had an instant of a lucid dream where we took control of our dream. Most of the time we wake up soon after, yet we can, with practice, learn to extend that control. And I think we all know that. And Carlos asks Don Juan, what do you call this, what we are doing now? Meaning that trying to imply that what they were doing now was real as opposed to dreams. And Don Juan says, I call it eating. And Carlos says, I call it reality because our eating is actually taking place. And Don Juan says dreaming also takes place. So it's just more practicality. It's not like Carlos just argues and argues and argues. And to say that dreaming doesn't take place is an odd argument. We experience dreams, and so dreams are real. And eventually Don Juan takes Carlos out to the desert chaparral and takes him to a place of power. He calls it a place of power. And he encourages Carlos to yell and be loud. And Carlos is, he's embarrassed to do it. He doesn't want to do it. Even when people aren't around, he's letting his embarrassment stall him out. He eventually does begin to get loud and do as Don Juan suggests. And this is something that I've practiced with my kids, as far as like taking personal power, is getting over embarrassment about what the world around us thinks about us, because that really will get in the way. And so I think that in part is what Don Juan is doing here, is getting Carlos to stop being so embarrassed by what the rest of the world may think. And you can see this in earlier excerpts that I read where Don Juan's encouraging Carlos to, say, talk to the plants. Even when people are around, don't be afraid to talk to the plants. And it's a matter of just getting over this embarrassment and stop letting people stall you out from getting what you're after. So that's what I think about that. Now I'll go into more of my personal experience with dreaming. So my earliest memory is a lucid dream. In this dream, I'm at the top of the stairs in the house that my parents owned. And if you're my age, I'm 46, you may remember that they used to put us in these like zip up onesies. It's like a full body onesie, zipped from the crotch up to the collarbone, and they had like these little plastic feet in them. So imagine little boy, little mixed kid up at the top of the stairs, like dimly lit stairs, and I decide that I want to fly. I realize that I'm dreaming, and I'm going to try flying, and I begin to float. Very unsteady at first, floating, and it took me a while to even make it a little ways down the stairs. And then once I would make it a little ways down the stairs, like my brain told me, and maybe if you decide to try flying in your dreams, your brain will do this. It like drug me back to the beginning, and I'd have to like exercise will to like get myself down the stairs. And I'm like flailing about, like going side to side, kind of like bouncing off of the walls, bouncing off the ceiling. No real control. Eventually I make it down the stairs, and I make it around the corner and into my mom's fish tank room. My mom had this big room with just all fish tanks, like 20-gallon fish tanks, and a black light and everything. And I make it down there, and I'm floating between the aisles looking at the fish. And then I wake up, and that's my earliest memory. And since then, I've had lots of dreams, or lots of lucid dreams. And even like dreaming for me, like if the Flintstones are on, like if the Flintstones are literally on and I'm asleep in the living room, like I'll dream that I'm in the Flintstones. Or I also am like a what do they call it? A sleepwalker. So I could carry a conversation on with you while I'm sleeping, or I can get up and like run around the house. Like I remember one dream where I had, like, if you've seen what's that movie, what is it, Little House of Horrors or something like that, where with Rick Moranis, where the plants are like monsters and they're eating people and stuff like that. So I've had dreams like that, and I'm like running around the house, literally running around the house, but dreaming, like trying to avoid plants. So I've had dreams like that. But, and you could consider that like a nightmare, but that all stopped with one dream. All my nightmares stopped with one dream. I was running through the snow, being chased by like this army, and they're in snowmobiles and tanks and motorcycles and all this, and I'm like defeating everybody like as they go. I'm like the superhero, but I'm also trying to run away from them all, and I'm like fighting everybody off and defeating all of these men. And I get in this building, and there's this one man that I just can't put down, and I'm like beating on him and, you know, shooting him and all this stuff, and he just won't go down. And I realize that I'm dreaming, and I say to him, "You can't play anymore. Sit down." And I point to a chair, and he sits down, and I go on with the dream. But now I'm lucid, and I understand it's a dream. And that's where my nightmare stopped. And I think that is where where how Don Juan is saying you got to let these things pass, and just you gain experience in dreaming, and that's how you get rid of the nightmares. And then, so my coolest lucid dream experience, my most powerful lucid dream experience, the one that really had me like whoa, was I'm running through the forest at night, and I'm having a conversation with a friend. In the dream, I know it's a friend. I don't quite recognize who it is. I have my headlamp on, and they're pointed, like I can see his feet and his legs. And we're having this great conversation. And I realize that I'm dreaming, and as happens often when you realize that you're dreaming, is I wake up. I'm like, man, that was an awesome conversation. I'm going to try to fall back to sleep in that exact moment. And I fall back asleep, and I fall literally back into the same exact moment where the conversation left off. Right? So that isn't even the coolest part of the dream. The coolest part is a couple months later, I'm running through the forest at about 3:30 a.m. I'm running with a friend, and we start having this conversation, and eventually, and it's a great conversation, eventually I realize that, hey, this is the conversation from my dream, from my lucid dream. So not only did I have a lucid dream, but I had a lucid dream that I woke up from and dropped back into, and I had a lucid dream that I woke up, dropped back into, and the dream came true. And I'm thinking, I haven't gotten that far in the book yet, but I'm thinking that these are the powers that, the types of powers, or maybe one of the powers that Don Juan is talking about, a warrior being able to tap into. For another cool take on lucid dreaming, you can watch a movie called Waking Life. It gave me some cool ideas as far as what can be done inside of a dream. It's rotoscoped, and what that is like animation over live footage. If you've seen Scanner Darkly, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you want to begin practicing lucid dreaming and you haven't before, there's a woman here on YouTube called Jody Whiteley, and she does a lucid dream induction, which you can watch on here, and I'll put a link to that in the description. I'm Coach Brian with Northwest Elite Spirit, and this has been The Power of Visualization. I just released a book on Amazon and Kindle, The ABCs of Strength and Endurance by Brian James Spears. For access to my suggested library, my blog, Northwest Elite Spirit merchandise, and to sign up for my Elite Performance packages, go to northwestelitespirit.com. Thank you.